How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Beis, Daf 52 of Minchas Menachos, friends. Daf 52 is gewaldig. Thank God it's not super hard, which is great because today is Purim. And that means I might be able to get out of the house for a little bit. I'm going to be heading over to our friend Reb Hillel Lester, doing a Megillah reading there. Just going to be gewaldig. And maybe I'll go out for a little bit, but I'll probably be learning most of the day. I got, Babble on Talmud to do, but thank God this isn't such a difficult daf, so it's helpful. Akoponim, friends, we finished the fourth parak of Minchas Menachos today, which is exciting. Wow, interesting. We're about halfway through the Masechta almost, 52 pages in, out of 110. Yet we're just finishing the fourth parak now. Out of how many prakim? Are there 14 prakim? I feel like there are 14 prakim. So I guess they're probably going to start getting smaller at some point. 13 prakim? Maybe 13. Anyways, okay. What's that? 13. Okay, yeah, we're going to finish the fourth parak of Minchas Menachos today, friends. We talk about who funds the helem, davar, shel, tzibur. Friends, do you remember the helem, davar, shel, tzibur from Masechta Horius? That's when we really first started getting our feet wet and our initial shocks of what Kodshim is and how intense the dafs are in Masechta Kodshim. Masechta Horius was the beginning of that, even though it's technically still in Seder Nezikin. And then we discussed the ingredient measurements for the Minchas Chavitin. This is interesting because the measurements actually change based on, of course, when the Kohen Gadol is alive and when he dies and a replacement is being searched for. And there is a machlokas between Reb Yossi ben Dostai and the Chacham about what exactly the measurements are. B'chol mikre, so that is what we will be discussing, friends. Let's jump in to Daf Nun Beis of Masechta Menachos. Friends, we begin on Daf Nun Beis Amid Aleph 2, 4, 5 lines into the Amud Daf Nun Beis Amid Aleph Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught Par helem, davar, shel, tzibur v'siri avodas kochavim. Givaldik. The Par helem, davar, shel, tzibur and the siri avodas kochavim. Who wants to tell us what these are? Okay, Par helem, davar, shel, tzibur, of course, is when the Sanhedrin rules that, let's say, chelev is a certain type of chelev is mutter, so the people go and they eat that chelev, and then it turns out that it's a mistake. So there is a communal sin offering that is brought on behalf of everybody. Similarly, if the Sanhedrin ruled that a certain type of avodah zarah was not in fact avodah zarah, so all the people went out and started worshiping it, and then it turns out that they were mistaken, so then the seiri avodas kochavim, the goats of avodah zarah, are brought in that case. It's also a communal offering. The question is, who funds this offering? How is it funded? So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Par helem, davar, shel, tzibur v'siri avodas kochavim. When it comes to the par helem, davar, shel, tzibur, when it comes to siri avodas kochavim, batchila magbin lahen divrei Reb Yehuda. Says Reb Yehuda that it's a new collection. It's a new collection. That the machzis hashekel that's collected every single year for the trumas for the trumas halishka, that the public offerings are funded with, do not take into account, do not include the par helem, davar, shel, tzibur, the siri avodas zarah, because those are korbanos that we don't necessarily assume that we're going to be bringing, right? The korban tamid shel shachar, the musafin. We know that these are korbanos that are going to be brought over the course of the year, and they're funded by the Trumas Halishka. Something like a par helem, davar, shel, tzibur we don't assume that we're going to have to bring any that year. And when a scenario happens, a situation happens that the Sanhedrin all of a sudden rules that a certain type of chelev is mutter or whatever, and now also we have to bring a korban par helem, davar, shel, tzibur, we have to raise money for it. We have to go back to the people and say, people, we need money for the par helem, davar, shel, tzibur, or the siri avodah zarah. Reb Shimon disagrees, and he says, Reb Shimon mitrumas halishka ein bayin. That Reb Shimon says, no, these also are funded by the trumas halishka, by the funds that were collected for the communal offerings. Vatani epcha, frag the gemore, that we learn in a brayso punkt fakert, the opposite. That it's Reb Shimon who says that it's a new collection, and Reb Yehuda who says that it's funded from the trumas halishka. So which is the latter one? Why is that important? What's important is, as Rashi points out, because as we learned at Daf Mem Vav of Masechta Eruvin, where the Gemara there goes through all sorts of scenarios of Tanoim and who we hold like. And when it comes to Machlekes of Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara in Eruvin says that we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, it's important for us to know which version of the Brisa is authoritative is the right one, because once we know which one is the right one, we can take Rabbi Yehuda's opinion and paskin like that. Because again, machlokes of Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, authoritative, I think. So therefore, we want to know which is the later one, because the assumption is that the later one will be the correct one, that the earlier one was mistaken, and then they fixed it in the later one. So which is the later one? That's going to be the one that we stick with. So even so which is the latter one, the one that is the correct version? Amur Rabbanon Kame de Rav Ashi, that the rabbi said before Rav Ashi, and they suggested to him, Lema Kamaisa Achrisa. Let's say that the initial version is the official fixed version, corrected version. Dishamina Leila Reb Shimon, because after all, we learned yesterday that when it came to funding the Minchas Chavitin, that when the Kohen Gadol dies and no replacement has been found yet, so who funds the Minchas Chavitin? Reb Shimon had said that it's funded by the communal, by the Chumas Halishka. But what then ended up happening was that in the Bayis Sheni, every single year there was a new Kohen Gadol, and it was common that there would be periods where there was no Kohen Gadol, and it was a burden on the public funds to be funding the Minchas Chavitin every day. So therefore, as we learned in a Mishnah, I believe that was in a Mishnah in Shkolim. Yes, a Mishnah in Shkolim. That Reb Shimon had said that they made a gezer, that there was a Tanai Bezdin, that the previous Kohen Gadol's heirs should be funding the Minchas Chavitim. But what ended up happening was that they weren't doing it. That when left up to the people weren't stepping up, the people weren't doing their responsibility. And therefore they had to make another takana to say, okay, we're actually going back to the original version, which is that it would be publicly funded. The point being that we can't rely upon the people to fund things. If we already have the communal fund that's funded once a year, and now we're paying for communal offerings from the communal fund, so then that works. But to start asking people hey, we're raising money for a pile of davar shel tzibur, it's not going to work. So we see that Reb Shimon has a precedent from the fact that he had said, okay, it's not working with the heirs funding the Minchas Chavitin. It makes sense that Reb Shimon would also say here that it's not going to work with the people funding the pile of davar shel tzibur. Use the communal funds instead. Therefore, it makes the Talmidei Rav Ashi the rabbis before Rav Ashi wanted to make the argument that the initial version of the Brisa is the correct version, the version where Reb Shimon says that it is the Chumas Halishka that funds the pile of davar shel tzibur and the Siyur Avodah Zarah, because we can't rely upon the people to contribute for it, to fund it themselves. Because as we saw yesterday, with the heirs, with relying upon the heirs to fund the Minchas Chavitin, Reb Shimon found that was unreliable. Rav Ashi responds, I don't necessarily agree 100% with that svara, and I'll tell you why, says Rav Ashi. You can even say that the latter version of the Brisa, the version where Reb Shimon says that we do in fact collect money from the people to fund the Pa'am Davar Shel Siyur Avodah Zarah. Because Kikachayish Reb Shimon Lepshia b'milsa delezbu kapare begava b'milsa deislu kapare begava lo chayish Reb Shimon Lepshia. Rav Ashi says I can make the following argument, that when it came to the heirs of the previous Kohen Gadol funding the Minchas Chavitin, like that, why would they want to? Well, there's no. There's no incentive. It's not like they get any kind of a kapara for them. They weren't the Kohen Gadol. Let's say their father was. But they're not the Kohen Gadol. It was never their responsibility to bring the Minchas Chavitin. They aren't currently the Kohen Gadol. They don't get any kind of kapara for it. There's no incentive. And yeah, it's not surprising that they were unreliable when it came to funding the Minchas Chavitin. However, to rely upon the Param Davar shel tzibur to be funded by the community, by the people who stand to get a kapara from that korban, it benefits them. I can make the argument that Reb Shimon would say that in that case we can rely upon the people funding it, since they're the ones who stand to get a kapara from it. So I can make that argument, says Rav Ashi. Ma'ave elad paskin. Drum roll, please. Omer le Rabazuti, the Rav Ashi Tashma Kamanir, the Sanya that we learned in the Brisa says, Korban ilachmi leishai, my offering, my bread, my barbecue. These are different ways of saying korbanis. Why so many different ways to say korbanis? Reach nichoichi, my pleasant shmek. Tishmu lakriv li b'mayadoi, you shall guard to offer me in my proper time. L'rabos, and that's of course by the korban tamid, by the korban tamid. That's offered every single day and is funded by the Trumas Halishka. And it says, why so many different ways to say korban? L'rabos, to include Param Davar shel tzibur v'sir avodas kuchavim, to include Param Davar shel tzibur sir avodas kuchavim shebayin mi Trumas Halishka, that they come from the Trumas Halishka. Divrei Reb Shimon. Azoi zokt Reb Shimon. These are the words of Reb Shimon. So we see that Reb Shimon says, like the first version of the Braise, that the Param Davar shel tzibur sir avodas zara are funded by the Trumas HaLishka. So the Machlokes is that Yehuda says that we collect money from the people to fund the Trumas to fund the Param Davar shel tzibur sir avodas zara. Right, we collect from the people, from the community, and Reb Shimon says that it is paid for from the communal funds. And since that's the definitive version of the Brisa, we will paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that it is paid for by the people. Friends, now we move on to the second section of today's daf, the ingredient measurements of the Minchas Chavitin. Okay. Basically this is going to take us to the end of the daf. Certain elements of it are going to kind of be focusing on when the Kohen Gadol is alive. Certain elements are going to be focusing after he dies and they're waiting for a replacement. But ultimately, these are what we're going to learn now are all going to contribute, at least the way I saw it. I saw things in terms of, what do I say it's talking about? I think ultimately everything we're going to learn is going to contribute ultimately to a fuller picture of what the Minchas Chavitin consisted of and how it was offered. Vishlema Oisa Kreva, so we had said that when the Kohen Gadol dies and a new Kohen Gadol has not yet been elected or whatever, what was it called? The elders, what was it called in Iran over there? The like committee of elders or something. The committee of elders didn't convene to appoint a supreme Kohen. Akoponim. So Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, says Reb Chia bar Abba, by Reb Yechanan asks, Shlema Shachris v'Shlema ben Abayim. I don't think I finished saying what I wanted to say, which is that when they haven't yet appointed a new Kohen Gadol, so we had said yesterday, right? Reb Yehuda, I learned it out from the word Osa. Reb Shimon, I learned it out from Kalil Tokter, that in the interim, the Minchas Chavitin is nonetheless offered, and instead of half of the Isarun of Soles offered in the morning and half of it in the afternoon, we said it's a whole Isarun. The question is that we're asking right now, is it a whole Isarun in the morning and a whole Isarun in the afternoon? Or maybe what it's saying is simply a whole Isarun in the morning and that's it. So Kilu, whereas the Kohen Gadol, when he's alive, he divides it in half in the morning, half in the afternoon. Maybe what it's saying is that when he's dead and when he dies and we haven't yet appointed a replacement, we just offer it all at once in the morning and that's it? Or do we have a full isaron in the morning and another full isaron in the afternoon? Okay. Says Rabbi Babble, boy, Rabbi Yechanan asks Akasha. Shlema shachas u'shlema bin arboim, odilma shlema shachas u'v'tela bin arboim. So when we say that there is a full isaron for the Minchas Chavitin in this interim period, is it that there is a full isaron in the morning and another full isaron in the afternoon, or is it that there's a full isaron in the morning and there is a full nothing in the afternoon? A full nothing in the afternoon. Amar Rava says, Rava Tashma, come and hear Shmini b'chavitim. This is a Mishnah from, well, it's two words of a Mishnah from Masechta Talmud. The Mishnah, well, there is a Mishnah in Masechta Yoma, and the Mishnah Masechta Yoma describes that there were 4 lotteries every single day in the Holy Temple. The second lottery was about who is going to haul the pieces of the Korban Tamid to the Mizbeach. So there's the Korban Tamid, which consists of a sheep and also flour and wine and all sorts of things. Who is going to, so there was a lottery about who was going to be, about essentially the Korban Tamid. And the question, so the lottery is really about the Korban Tamid Shachar, but I saw in the Rambam that the same thing applies to the Korban Tamid, that basically whoever wins the lottery, so to speak, whoever is chosen for these jobs in the morning would do the same jobs in the afternoon for the Korban Tamid Shabin Arbaim. Now, so the second lottery of the day would be about who's going to be taking the parts, well, about who is going to be involved in the offering of the Korban Tamid, and part of that was that, so there were 13 jobs there. 9 of those jobs were dedicated to who was going to be bringing parts of the elements, components of the Korban Tamid to the Mizbeach. Now, back to the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid. So it says there that person number 8, whoever was chosen in the 8th choice of the second lottery, his job was to bring the Minchas Chavitin to the Mizbeach, which is interesting because the Minchas Chavitin was the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol. So why wasn't the Kohen Gadol bringing it to the Mizbeach? So I was trying to figure this out a bit. So my impression right now, I hope I'm right, or at least right according to some opinion that is valid. My impression is that basically the Kohen Gadol, what's the Minchas Chavitin? Well, the Kohen Gadol brings flour, he brings oil, brings levona, and then he takes the flour and the oil, mixes it together, cooks it, bakes it, divides it into it's a machlekes. If he divides it into 12 loaves and cuts them in half, that's what the Rambam says, or 6 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon, whatever it is. It could be that that's kind of where his role, like that's what he has to. He doesn't have to necessarily bring it to the Mizbeach, but he kind of prepares it. So it could be like he bakes all the stuff and prepares everything, and then at that point, somebody else can now take his mincha to the Mizbeach, I guess, because, right, why isn't he himself taking it? But my impression is that maybe, maybe he does all the preparation and somebody else can actually take it to the Mizbeach and burn it. I'm not like super clear there. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Anywho, so Mishnah in Masechta Talmud says Shmini ba chavitim, that the person who was zoichet to be the 8th man in the second lottery, so his role is that he will bring the Minchas Chavitim of the Kohen Gadol to the Mizbeach, to the ramp of the Mizbeach. Now, it says, Rava argues, Ve'im Isa dibitela ben arbayim. Now, if it is so, that in this interim period, there is no Minchas Chavitin in the afternoon at all. It's just simply offered in full in the morning, the full Isar in the morning, and there's no Minchas Chavitin in the afternoon at all. Well then, what's the 8th guy going to do in the afternoon? There are actually times when there is no 8th man for the Minchas Chavitin. Well, in the case that we are discussing, Kohen Gadol dies, and there is not yet a replacement. In such a scenario, if we're going to say that there is no Minchas Chavitin in the afternoon, it's simply offered entirely in the morning, and there's nothing in the afternoon, well, in that case, there won't be an eighth man bringing the Minchas Chavitin to the Mizbeach in the afternoon. So from the fact that we are talking about an eighth man bringing a Minchas Chavitin to the Mizbeach, probably both in the morning and the afternoon, so it means that there is always going to be a Minchas Chavitin in the afternoon, even in this interim period. Amur Rabban Kame de Reb Yirmiyah. So the rabbis said over this pshat of this argument of Rave, the svara of Rave, they said this over before Reb Yirmiyah in Eretz Yisrael. Of course, Rave was in Babble, and word got to Reb Yirmiyah in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, Reb Yirmiyah was in Eretz Yisrael Yid. Omar, he says, Bavloi tipshoi, those foolish Babylonians, mishum de yazvu ba'ara be'asra de chshocha, because they live in such a dark place. Amei shmaitza de mechashchon, they have svaras that are all foggy and not good. Like a real charif Eretz Yisrael Tika Yid. Even then, they had the Yid in Eretz Yisrael. It's like it's more charif over here. Even back then. Ella, rather, Rabbi Yirmiyah makes the following argument: De katani shvi bisoles chi biyayin. You know what else it says in that Mishnah in Masechta Tamid? Yeah, it says that guy number 8, Kohen number 8, brings the Minchas Chavitin to the ramp. That's true. What does it say about guy number 7? About Kohen number 7? It says that he brings the flour of the Minchas Nisachim to the ramp. What does it say about Kohen number 9? That he brings the wine of the Nisuch Ayayin to the Mizbeach. Hachinami delo batle. What, you're going to say there also that there is always going to be flour to be brought and that there's always going to be wine to be brought? What about the price that says Minchasam v'niskeim balayla, Minchasam v'niskeim afilu l'macher, that the Minchas Nisachim and the Nisuch Hayayin can even be at night, not when the not being offered together with the Korban Tamid. It can even be at night, it can be the next day. So there isn't always going to be a Kohen number 7. There isn't always going to be a Kohen number 9. And yet it's in the Mishnah. So clearly there are certain jobs that are listed in the Mishnah that aren't always in practice necessary. These exceptions are not being, the Mishnah is not talking about exceptions. The Mishnah is talking about the rules rather than the exceptions to the rules. The Mishnah is saying that in a standard situation, Kohen number 7 brings the flour for the Minchas Nisachim. Kohen number 8 brings the Minchas Chavitin. Kohen number 9 brings the wine for the Nisuch Ayayin. Now, there could be scenarios where there's no flour, where there's no wine, or where there's no Minchas Chavitin either. That's just simply not what the Mishnah is talking about. And therefore, Rabbi Yirmiyah argues that the fact that the 8th man bringing the Minchas Chavitin is listed in the Mishnah is not a raya to say that the Minchas Chavitin will be offered in its entirety in the afternoon in this interim period. So achinami di'i lo katani. Right, so just like when it comes to the Minchas Nisachim and the Nisuch Hayayin, it was talking about the rule rather than any exceptions to the rule. So the same thing by the Minchas Chavitin. It wasn't talking about the exception to the rule where we're in this interim period between Kohen Gadol. That's not what the Mishnah is talking about. Adurei kami de Rava. So they relayed Reb Yirmiyah's reaction and response back to Rava in Babble. Omar, and he says, Oy vavoy chaval. Mibishusin amre kamayu. They only tell them the negative things, you know. Mitivusin lo amre kamayu. They never report to them the positive things that we do. Rava says, right, Rabbi Yirmiyah, anything he ever hears, anything that's ever reported to Rabbi Yirmiyah is only the negative things that we say. They never report to him the positive things that we say. Hadar Amra Rava, And in fact, Rava rather ultimately changed his position. He still had the same maskana, which is that the Minchas Chavitin would be offered in the afternoon, but not necessarily based on the Mishnah in Talmud. He says, Other Amar Rava, in the end, Rava changed his mind. He says, Hanami Tivusinhi, this is in fact a positive, right? This is a positive thing that we say over here in Babble that should be related to Reb Yirmiyah. Amar Kol, that the pasuk says, Soles Mincha Talmud, that the pasuk says by the Minchas Chavitin that it is a flour mincha offering Talmud. Harei L'cha Ki Minchas Tamidin. It's like the Minchas Tamidin, right? Just like the Korban Talmud is always every day, morning and afternoon. So therefore, also the Minchas Chavitin is every day, morning and afternoon. And says Rava, you see, in the end, L'maskana, we are saying the right thing, says Rava, and this should be relayed to Reb Yirmiyah, that yes, the Minchas Chavitin would also be offered in the afternoon, even during the interim period, because it says, Solis Minchas Talmud, that is compared to the Korban Talmud. The Korban Talmud is always offered day, right, morning, afternoon. Same thing for the Minchas Chavitin. Chaval, that wasn't relayed to Reb Yirmiyah. Ma'abe'Allah, how do we pass in Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Tashma Kavanir, deciding that we learn in the Bible says Shlema Shachris v'Shlema bin Arbaim, that the full Isaron during this interim period was offered in the morning, as well as a full Isaron in the afternoon. Reb Yechanan says, Reb Yechanan Pligiba Abba Yosi ben Dostoi v'Rabbanon. Abba Yosi ben Dostoi and the rabbis argue when it comes to the Minchas Chavitin of a Kohen Gadol when he's alive. We're not talking about the interim period right now. We're talking about Kohen Gadol. How was the Minchas Chavitin actually offered? Abba Yosef ben Dostoi, Omer says, Abba Yosef ben Dostoi, mafrish la shnei kmatzim shel levona, kometz shachris v'kometz ben arboim. That says, Abba Yosef ben Dostoi, so, okay, you'd have, of course we know, that the Minchas Chavitin was an isaron of flour, and that would be divided in half. Half would be offered in the morning, half would be offered in the afternoon. Now, what about the kometz of levona? The kometz of frankincense. Was that also half a kometz in the morning and half a kometz in the afternoon? Or maybe when it came to the frankincense, there would be one kometz in the morning for the half of Isaron, and in the afternoon, when you offer the other half of the Isaron, there would be another kometz. So Abba Yosef ben Dostoi's opinion is that there was a full kometz each time, a full kometz of frankincense. The Rabbanan Amrei, but the rabbis say, Mafresh la kometz echad, no, there's one kometz of Livona, Chatzi kometz shachris, v'chatzi kometz ben arbaim. Half of it was offered in the morning with the half Isaron, and the other half of the kometz was offered in the afternoon with the other half of Isaron. Mamish, everything was divided in half. But what's the machlekes here? Abba Yosef ben Dostai sover lo ashkechon chatzi kometz the kariv. Says Abba Yosef ben Dostai, when do we ever see a half kometz that's offered? It's always a full kometz. So here also, we're talking about a full kometz of Livona in the morning and a full kometz of Livona in the afternoon. Rabbanan Saver was the rabbi told, Lo ashkechon isaron debayi shnei kmatzim. We never find that one isaron is being brought with two kometzes of frankincense. And therefore, one isaron, one kometz of frankincense. And it's divided between the morning and the afternoon. By Reb Yochanan now asks the following question. So now, in the situation that we've been discussing, when the Kohen Gadol dies, they have not yet appointed a replacement, which means that how much soles is being offered in the morning and afternoon now, friends? We just discussed it. A full isaron in the morning and a full isaron in the afternoon, i.e., twice the amount that you would normally offer in terms of flour. Normally it would be half a isaron in the morning, now it's a full isaron in the morning. Normally it would be a half isaron in the afternoon, now it's a full isaron in the afternoon. The question is, according to the rabbis, would they also now double their komets measure, their kometzes? Would we say that normally it's a half a kometz of frankincense in the morning and a half a kometz in the afternoon? Maybe now we should double it to a full kometz in the morning and a full kometz in the afternoon, since we're doubling the flour. Maybe we just double all the ingredients. So the Rabbanon huchpila livonoso olo. Do we double the livona in the Minchas Chavitin during this period or not, according to the rabbis? Do we say mitoch shehuchpila salto huchpila livonoso? Do we say that just like the flour is doubled, so also the livona is doubled? O Dilma, my de gali, my de lo gali. Or perhaps, look, as we had learned yesterday, the reason why we double the flour is because the pasuk says, either according to Rabbi Yehuda it says osa, according to Rabbi Shimon it says kalil takta, or whatever it is. The pasuk explicitly says that the flour is doubled. The pasuk didn't explicitly say that the levona is doubled. So do we say that, okay, since the Torah didn't say anything about the levona, so we're going to leave it? We continue to have a kometz of levona in the morning, a kometz in the afternoon? Or do we say, no, just like the flour is doubled, so the levona is ochit doubled? Vishemen. Next question. What about the oil during this interim period? Bain la'Abba Yossi ben Dostoi, bain la'Rabbanon mau. Now this question is both according to Abba Yossi ben Dostoi as well as the Chacham. Whereas the previous question about the levona was really only to the Chacham, because they say usually there's half a kometz in the morning, half a kometz in the afternoon. So the question is, there now a full kometz in the morning, a full kometz in the afternoon. The question was not about whether Abba Yossi ben Dostoi would say, are we going to offer 2 kometzes in the morning? No, that's for sure not. But now, what about according to Abba Yossi ben Dostoi? Because Abba Yossi ben Dostoi agrees that when it comes to the oil, of a standard Minchas Chavitin, okay, so in terms of the Isaron, okay, when it comes to standard Minchas Chavitin, when the Kohen Gadol is alive, you have an Isaron of flour that's divided in half in the morning, half in the afternoon. When it came to the Levona, we said there's a machlokas, the Chacham say half a kometz in the morning, half a kometz in the afternoon. Abba Yossi ben Dostoi says a full kometz in the morning, full kometz in the afternoon. But when it comes to the oil, as we learned yesterday, 3 logs of oil in the Minchas Chavitin, everyone agrees 1.5 logs in the morning, 1.5 logs in the afternoon. That's also divided in half. Abba Yossi ben Dostoi agrees with that as well. 1.5 logs in the morning, 1.5 logs in the afternoon. So now the question is, both according to the rabbis and according to Abba Yossi ben Dostoi, when it comes to the oil, so in this interim period where we're doubling the flour, do we double the oil as well? 3 logs in the morning, 3 logs in the afternoon, or does that remain at a log and a half in the morning, a log and a half in the afternoon? So again, Vishem, when it comes to the oil, Bain la'Abba Yossi ben Dostoi, Bain l'Rabbanon mau. What do we do? Do we double it? Don't we double it? Amar Rava, says Rava. Interestingly, Rava has a similar mahalich to what he had on Amud Aleph. He's going to try to bring it from a diuk in the Mishnah in... Where is this Mishnah? Is this later on? Yeah, this is a Mishnah in the 11th parak, Daf Kuf Hey, Daf Kuf Vav. It is, in the 13th parak. Yavalik. So there's a Mishnah later on in Masechta Menachos. So Rava says, Rava, Tashma, that the Mishnah says later on, Hey Kmotzin Hey, that there are 5 kometzes. And the Mishnah lists 5 kometzes. Now, included in those 5 kometzes are the 2 bazichin of the lechem aponim. That the 2 bazichin levona of the lechem aponim, there was 1 kometz in each. The point being that each bazach was counted as a separate kometz. And therefore Rava wants to argue that what's missing there is, if we're saying that in the interim, when the Kohen Gadol dies, and they haven't yet appointed a new Kohen Gadol, if we're saying that just like we double the flour, even according to the rabbis, we would double the frankincense, and it would be a full kometz in the morning and a full kometz in the afternoon, well then, those 2 kometzes, right, just like for the 2 bazichin of the lechem aponim were counted as 2 kometzes on the list, so we should include another 2 kometzes, the full kometz in the morning, the full kometz in the afternoon, when the Kohen Gadol dies and they haven't yet appointed a new Kohen Gadol. But it's excluded from the list, implying that during this interim period, it remains a half kometz according to the Chacham. That's why it's not listed with the 5 kometzes, because it's only a half kometz. Tashma, again, says Rava, coming here from a Mishnah in the 13th parak of Masechta Menachos. Although it could be in the, maybe the reason why I thought it was 11th parak, the prakim I think are switched around a little bit in the Mishnayos versus in the Gemara. I think actually in the Mishnayos it may have been the 11th parak, although I'd have to look it up. Okay, fine. Now, where are we? So this is what we're talking about. Hey, Kamatzin, and there are 5 kometzes. V'im isa. Now, if it were so that when the Kohen Gadol dies and they have not yet appointed a new one, in this interim period, there would be a full kometz of levona in the morning and another full one in the afternoon. Zimin the mishkachas zayin. Sometimes there are 5. Sometimes there would be 7 kometzes, but the Mishnah doesn't account for that. To which the Gemara says, me de'i lo katani, like we answered earlier, you can say that it is a full kometz. The reason why it's excluded from the list is because it's an exceptional scenario. The Mishnah was not listing exceptional scenarios. But Rav Papa asked a gevaldige kasha. Yosef Rav Papa v'kamer lo shmaita. Rav Papa was giving over this sugya. Omelei Rav Yosef bar Shmaya le Rav Papa, says Rav Yosef bar Shmaya to Rav Papa, v'amayle kometz b'chutz. De'i hava v'katoni. In that Mishnah, and Daf Kuf, in that Mishnah of listing 5 things, what are the 5? Well, we said the 2 baziche levona, each have a kometz in them. What else? There was the kometz of the levona of the Minchas Nedava. There was the kometz of the levona of something else. Let's see, what does it say in Daf Kuvav? Where are you? Come on. Hurry up. Okay, what do we have here? Do we have it? Oh yeah, 5. Okay, I don't see it. There was one more. Okay, I'm not looking it up right now. There were 5. Now, one of the 5, however, and this is the point, one of the 5 is that when you scoop up a kometz and offer it b'chutz, remember the sugya of Shchutei chutz and aloba amayla b'chutz? Now that's an exceptional scenario, and it was listed in the Mishnah, which is a problem. Because if we wanted to say, right, Rava's argument was that it must be that we aren't having a full kometz, because if we did have a full kometz of levona in this interim period, it would be listed in the Mishnah. To which he said, no, it's an exceptional, we're not listing exceptional things, but we are listing exceptional things. We have a mayla b'chutz, that's exceptional. That shouldn't be happening, and it's on the list. Says the Gemara, Maya ve'ela nu. So what do we say in the end? Friends, what do we say in the end? Amr of Nachman Yitzchak Tashma says Nachman Yitzchak, come here, the Tani that we learn in the Brisa, Kohen Gadol shemes, v'lo minu acher tachtav. You have a Kohen Gadol who died, and we don't yet have a replacement. Shleim Meshachos v'shleim ben arbaim. Okay, of course, as we know, a full Isaron of Solis in the morning, another full Isaron of Solis in the afternoon. Umafishla beis kamatzin, and 2 kometzes of levona. Kometz shachar or kometz ben arbaim. A full kometz in the morning, a full kometz in the afternoon. Umafishla shloshes lugin, and 3 logs of oil. Log v'mechza shachar, log v'mechza ben arbaim. A log and a half in the morning and a log and a half in the afternoon. Interesting. So what did we just say? We have a brisa that says that in this interim period, okay, a full Isaron of Solis in the morning, a full Isaron of Solis in the afternoon. We knew that. Now here's where things get interesting. We're saying a log and a half of oil in the morning and a log and a half of oil in the afternoon, which means that clearly we're not doubling the oil. If we were doubling the oil, it would be 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. So clearly we're not doubling the oil. And it says a full kometz in the morning and a full kometz in the afternoon, which means that if we're not doubling the oil, we're probably also not doubling the kometz either. Which means that this must be the opinion of Abadosi, Abiyosi ben Dustoi, who says that b'chol mikre, a full kometz is offered in the morning, a full kometz is offered in the afternoon of levona. And in terms of the oil, it's a log and a half in the morning, a log and a half in the afternoon. And in this interim period, basically everything stays the same. The flour is doubled, but other than that, he's saying that the oil stays the same at a log and a half, and the kometz stays the same at one log. And just like Rabbi Yosef ben Dostai is saying that the levona and the shemen stay the same, we're not doubling anything, the Chacham would also say not to double anything. All they argue about is how much levona to bring. But in terms of like, are we going to double the recipe when the Kohen Gadol dies? They wouldn't disagree with that. And just like Rabbi Yosef ben Dostai says that we're not doubling what we already have, so also the Chacham would say not to double anything, and they would say half a kometz of frankincense in the morning and half a kometz of frankincense in the afternoon. Mani, who is the author of this brayso? Ilem Rabban, if you say it's the rabbis, Maishna levonasa de huchbela, umaishna shamna de lo huchbela. If it's the rabbis who say that normally a Kohen Gadol would bring half a kometz of frankincense in the morning and half a kometz of frankincense in the afternoon, and we're saying here it's a full kometz, which means that he doubled that if it's the rabbis, we're saying that we're doubling the frankincense. Well, then why double the frankincense but leave the oil alone? Right? Maishna levonasa de huchbela. Why would we be doubling the levona, shamna de lo huchbela, and we aren't doubling the oil? Ela Abba Yossi ben Dostai, rather this is the opinion of Abba Yossi ben Dostai, and he's saying everything stays the same. That always, even just a regular Minchas Chavitin of a Kohen Gadol when he's alive, you're going to have two kometzes, one full kometz in the morning, one full kometz in the afternoon. Ulevona lo huchbela v'shemen lo uchbal. And therefore, we aren't doubling the levona, full kometz in the morning, full kometz in the afternoon. That's, according to Abba Yosef ben Dostai, that's normal. And also, we are not doubling the oil either, and it's going to be a log and a half of oil. Umi de shemen l'Abba Yosef ben Dostai lo huchbal. And just like the oil, according to Abba Yosef ben Dostai, was not doubled, it remained a log and a half. Levonosa v'shamna l'Rabbana nami lo uchbelu. So also according to rabbis, the oil as well as the frankincense was not doubled, i.e., there would be a log and a half of oil and a half a kometz of frankincense. So, according to the rabbis in this interim period, there would be a full isaron of flour in the morning, a full isaron of flour in the afternoon. However, when it comes to the oil and when it comes to the frankincense, we are talking about half amounts. A log and a half of oil, half a kometz of frankincense. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Aloch ek Abba Yossi ben Dostai, that the Aloch is like Abba Yossi ben Dostai, that when it comes to the kometz, it's a full kometz. Does Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Rabbi Yochanan says Alocha Kistam Mishnah. Okay, of course we attribute the notion of Alocha Kistam Mishnah to Rabbi Yochanan. V'tnanan, we learn in the Mishnah later on in Daf Kuvav, Chamisha Kmotzene, that there are only 5 kometzes, and this would be 7 kometzes. Amorai Ninu V'Alibud Rabbi Yochanan. Well, it's actually 2 Amoraim claiming that Rabbi Yochanan said different things, which is very interesting, right? This notion of Rabbi Yochanan saying Alocha Kistam Mishnah, not all of his students necessarily agreed with that, right? I think Alocha Kistam Mishnah is the kind of thing that often we take for granted, Alocha Kistam Mishnah, but that is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, and not all of his students, this isn't the first time we've seen this, not all of his students necessarily agree with that concept, that would necessarily agree that Rabbi Yochanan says Alocha Kistam Mishnah. So, anyways, okay, so it's questionable if we actually all like Abba Yossi ben Dostai or not. The Rambam, I believe, paskins that we're talking about half a kometz of levona, both when the Kohen Gadol is alive as well as during this interim period. Friends, that was Daf Nun Beis of Masechta Menachos. We discussed who funds the part of davar shel tzibur as well as the Seirei Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yehuda said it is a new public collection. We got to go around asking people for funds for these public korbanos. Rabbi Shimon says that it is funded from the Trumas Halishka that is collected yearly and that funds public offerings. We then discussed the ingredient measurements of the Minchas Chavitin. We discussed everything. When the Kohen Gadol is alive, when the Kohen Gadol is not alive, and there's an interim period we discussed the flour, we discussed the oil, we discussed the frankincense. So when the Kohen Gadol is alive, so Abba Yossi ben Dostoi had said that we're talking about, so when the Kohen Gadol is alive, a half isaron of flour, 1.5 loaves of oil, and a full komatz of levona for each, right, in the morning and in the afternoon. The rabbis say we're talking about half an isaron of flour, 1.5 loaves of oil, and half a komatz of levona in the morning as well as in the afternoon. When the Kohen Gadol is not alive and there's an interim period, so Abba Yossi ben Dostoi says a full isaron of flour, 1.5 loaves of oil, and a full kometz of levona. And the rabbis say a full isaron of flour, 1.5 loaves of oil, and a half kometz of levona. Friends, that was the Nun Beis of Masechta Menachos. We finished the 4th parak of Masechta Menachos. Tomorrow we will jump into the 5th parak. Have a great Shushan Purim. Peace.